Warzone Season 5 is finally here, and if you're wanting to dominate in your games, then you're going to need the best settings that give you amazing visibility of enemies whilst keeping your FPS nice and high. Hey everyone, it's FourEyes or Dave here. Welcome back to another video. Today we are on Modern Warfare or Warzone, whatever you want to call it. It's Season 5, it's here right now. We've got the new stuff in the game like the stadium being open, we've got the train that you can ride around on, and we've got new game modes and all sorts of new guns. There's a lot of new stuff to try and dominate with at the moment in Warzone. And today I'm going to be covering the best settings that you can have right now in Warzone to give you great visibility of enemies from afar. Very important when you're using some of your longer range weapons and spotting enemies on the move, but also maintaining a good, stable, high FPS on a wide variety of PC systems. We're going to be covering predominantly the graphics settings in this video, but also I've got a little bit extra on the end for any of you guys using Nvidia cards that's really going to maximize your visibility in game using some of their filters. So, without further ado, if you guys are new to the channel, then please do subscribe below and click that notification bell beside it. It really helps me out. Leave a like, leave a comment below, get involved in the action, and let's jump straight into these settings. So we're on the menu screen at the moment. Now we're going to move into the options menu, and as I said, we're focusing predominantly on the graphics settings today. So starting from the top in the display section, the first option we have here is display mode. This ideally should be set at full screen. However, for the purposes of my recording today, I've got it on full screen borderless. You guys put it on full screen. It means that Modern Warfare will occupy your monitor as a solo application. It won't allow your monitor to be rendering stuff in the background on other tabs of Chrome or anything you have open in the background. So make sure you've got this set to full screen here. Next, make sure you've got your correct monitor selected. Obviously, you'll know this because it'll be open on the correct monitor. Make sure you've got your graphics card selected, and we get to our first key piece here, which is render resolution. I would recommend that everyone keeps this on 100 or 100%, which means that we're rendering out our native resolution. So I've got a 1440p monitor, and so I am rendering out a 2560 by 1440. If you're having real struggles with FPS in this game and on maybe a lower end PC, then you can actually turn this down a little bit. For example, I could turn mine down to 75%, which would turn this into a 1080p resolution instead, which would give me a lot more FPS, but would make things blurry and not keep that visibility up that we're aiming for. So leave it 100. Aspect ratio, 16:9 is decent for enough people. Some people might want to switch to a different aspect ratio. It can give some performance increase if necessary, but a 16:9 is a fairly standard aspect ratio for most people, so I would just leave it at that or at automatic. Sync every frame. VSync, we do not want this on. This is going to introduce input lag. It's not going to feel good to run with. If you're someone who wants to use G-Sync, then enable that through your graphics card. So either through the Nvidia control panel or through whatever AMD's version is. Whichever one of those, do it through there. Do not do FreeSync or G-Sync by using the VSync here. It's not good. Custom frame limit. I actually have a custom frame limit enabled here. I've got mine set to 141. This is because I do run G-Sync on my monitor, and to activate G-Sync, I'm not going to go into it too much in this video, but you need to have your FPS slightly below the the hertz of your monitor, the refresh rate. So I've got mine set to 141. I'd recommend putting a custom frame rate limit on just to cap the frame rate at something stable so you're not going all over the place with your frames. So find what you're stable at in game and apply a custom frame rate limit around that level to keep yourself at a nice constant frame rate. Make sure Nvidia highlights are disabled. We don't want things like this running in the background. This will use up your system where you don't want it to be used, so make sure they're disabled. If you're having any performance issues, I would recommend a first stop to be to come to this restart shaders installation and just click this. It will reinstall all the shaders from the beginning. It can take a while, but it can fix a lot of stuttering issues that you might be having, so this is a good place to come to when you're having some issues. Display gamma, you've got 2.2 or 2.4 here. In general, if you're playing on a PC monitor, you're going to have this set to 2.2. 2.4 is usually for TVs and stuff like that. So leave the display gamma at 2.2 for most of you PC gamers. Next, we're into the details and textures section. Texture resolution, you can shove this on very low for the max performance. This will not affect how people look or spotting people from afar, so it's actually fine for visibility to have this on very low. It just makes the game look a bit garbage, I will admit. It makes a lot of the textures on walls and stuff seem very blocky and kind of horrible. If anything, because it smudges over some of those textures, you can actually spot enemies easier having this lower, but the game looks really, really bad, I will admit. But very low is what I'd recommend. Texture filter and isotropic, you'll see I actually have this on high. You know, this isn't just going to be a video where I just say put everything on low. There are a couple things I actually recommend having on. Texture filter and isotropic has little to no impact on your frame rate, and you'll see that even when you've got your texture resolution set to very low, you can add a decent detail here, and it says improves texture quality of surfaces when viewed at an angle. I just find that this actually helps in a lot of scenarios that you get into, having that extra little bit of detail on when you're looking at textures from certain angles. You can spot where enemies are a bit better in terms of the depth and where they are, how far away they are from you. I just recommend putting this on high. It's a good setting to have on. Particle quality, have this on low. Bullets, impact and sprays disabled, and tessellation disabled. This is all basically fluff, in my opinion. It's extra bits that you really don't need to have switched on, because whether they're going to affect your FPS a lot or not, they are visual clutter that you don't need, and they will affect your visibility in game to some extent. Today's video is sponsored by ProSight, a PC application that gives players access to Counter-Strike style custom crosshairs in any PC game they want. The application comes with an easy-to-use interface, allowing players to customize their crosshair to any size, color, and style, save it as a preset, and then take it into games like Warzone, Fortnite, and Sea of Thieves. For more info on the app, head to centerpointgaming.com, link in the description. Next, in the shadow and lighting section, shadow map resolution, shove this straight on low. Shadows are infamous for causing much lower FPS by having them on higher. Turn this on low. It's not really going to affect the look of the game much at all, and it will give you a hell of a lot more FPS in game. Next, we've got two settings here, cache spot shadows and cache sun shadows. Now, these are two which I actually like to have enabled. I think it's because I just did the update recently, so they've disabled for some reason. These will enable you to be able to cache in or store certain shadows that are cast in-game. You see here it says, enabling this option causes the game to use additional memory RAM. So if you're someone sitting on a decent amount of RAM, I'm sitting on 16 gigabytes of RAM, then this is a really good setting to run, because it will store certain shadows into the RAM, and then when it requires them, it can pull them from your RAM very, very quickly, causing you to not stutter. If you're someone who does not have much RAM or much VRAM, then I would recommend turning this off. But I'd say the general advice for most people is to either have it on or just try out on and off and see how it affects your settings, because for a lot of people who have actually just turned this off, they found that turning it on helps them out a lot. So I'd recommend trying both of these settings out for both of the cache settings. Particle lighting, we want this on low. It's just more visual clutter that we don't need, and it will actually affect your FPS quite heavily, ones like this. DirectX ray tracing, this is something which a lot of you won't even have access to unless you have one of the RTX cards. I do have one of the RTX cards, but there's no way that I'm running this in a multiplayer game. In single player, maybe I'll try it out. I have actually tried it out before, and it does look very good, but it's very bad for FPS, so make sure this is off. Ambient Occlusion is another one which can affect your FPS fairly heavily, so I would have this off. And then screen space reflections, I've left these on low. I like to have a couple of reflections here and there in the game. It can actually help sometimes with just how the game looks, and the difference between disabled and low is very minimal in terms of FPS, so I would recommend either go for disabled or go for low. Personal preference for you guys. Next, we are onto anti-aliasing in the post-processing effects, and this is going to be one of the most contested topics in a video like this. Basically, if you want the max FPS here, put this on off, but turning it to SMAA 1X, don't put it on any of these ones, these are going to tank your FPS, but SMAA 1X, you're probably going to lose about 4 to 5 frames of performance in most scenarios, and I am someone who really doesn't like jaggies in game. I don't like seeing these jagged edges that you can see up here. I like having that smooth edge. I find that it helps with visibility a hell of a lot when you're in some of those like rural areas, when you're running across fields, like in front of airport, or like between airport and superstore and that kind of area where there's all the green. If you're in some of the wooded areas over at farmland, having anti-aliasing off just makes everything look so horrible there, and it's actually quite hard to spot enemies. So I'd recommend trying out SMAA 1X and seeing if your performance can handle it. If you really can't handle it and you want to get some free performance, then put it on off. because you will get better performance out of it. So it's another contested topic, but for visibility and for balance of FPS on my system, SMA-A1X does the job. Depth of field disabled, filmic strength 0, world motion blur and weapon motion blur both disabled, and film grain 0. This is all just visual clutter that we do not want in the game. And that is all of our video settings. So if you sit on those settings, we apply all those, you're going to get very, very good FPS and decent visibility already off the bat. However, I did mention at the start of the video there was an extra part to this video, and that is going to be the Nvidia filters. So if you guys don't know how to activate these Nvidia filters, I'm going to show you right now. So here we go, guys. I've opened up GeForce Experience here. You'll see that the gameplay will be lagging a bit in the background because I've switched to a display capture in OBS. But you want to come over to your settings up here, and you want to make sure that in-game overlay is enabled. And then that will enable you once you're in-game. If I just close this down, so we're back in game, you can hold Alt and press Z, and you'll be greeted with this screen, which is what you can use to do gameplay recordings with shadow play. You can do highlights, you can do screenshots. But the thing that we're focused on is this game filter feature up here. So if we click this, you'll be met with this display piece on the side. What you want to do here is select one of these 3 styles, and you can begin adding filters. Now, the 3 we're going to use, and I'm just going to add them in now, are going to be color, sharpen, and brightness and contrast. So you'll already see that the game will look a little bit different on the right here, but if we change these up, I like to put color. I leave tint color to 0 and tint intensity 0. We don't want to change the actual color of the screen. We just want to increase the vibrance, which is this option here. And I actually put this on 100% because this game looks so washed out and horrible. Then I go to sharpen, and I increase the sharpen to about 60%. So we get a nice little sharp image on the game, which is really nice. This is basically to counteract some of what the anti-aliasing does in some ways. It sharpens up the image without leading it to be too jagged. And then the final one, in brightness and contrast, the only thing I actually change in here is I take the shadows and I decrease them from -30 to -60, which just cuts out a lot of the shadows where people would hide in games. What I'm going to show you next, and you'll see in the background, is some gameplay comparison with these settings on versus having these settings off. And you'll see that there is a massive difference here. The change is just immeasurable. I find it very hard to play without these Nvidia filters on now. These do actually drop your FPS a little bit. So if you're running on a lower end system, then I would recommend it just sticking to the standard graphic settings that I was talking about and not adding these. But if you've got that little bit of FPS to spare, like I do, this will boost your visibility in game tenfold. You'll be able to spot so many more fights happening, enemies running, and all that kind of stuff, and just in general have a better time in the game. So I'd super recommend that you try these settings out. And there we go, guys. They are all of the settings that I'm currently using in Season 5 for Warzone. And hopefully with these settings, as I said, you're going to get some really good FPS, you're going to get really good visibility, and hopefully this will just lead you to win a lot more games. If you are new to the channel, as I said at the beginning, then please do subscribe below, click that notification bell. It really does help me out, and I'm trying to build a nice community over here, giving you guys guides and settings for a bunch of different games. I want to get some more Warzone content out for you guys this season, see if I can get in the mix with all the other creators, and hopefully we'll have an absolute blast over here. So it's been FourEyes or Dave here. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.